Hello, and welcome back to A Real Horror Show. First of all, I hope all you guys out there are doing great, although we all do have the blues now that the spooky month has come to an end. But nonetheless, I hope you all had a great Halloween. The good news is, however, every single day on this channel is Halloween, and the spooky season never really ends here. And if you out there love Halloween and all things horror, please consider slashing that subscribe button and hitting that notification bell so you don't miss out on a single upload. So anyway, let's get into today's video. A few weeks ago, I made a video talking about every Michael Myers figure that the company NECA Toys has ever produced, ranking the ones that I own in my horror collection from worst to best in the process. And it was a list spanning over 20 years of Halloween collectibles. Well, you guys seem to really enjoy that video, so I thought we'd give the same treatment to one of horror's other most beloved icons, the one and only Freddy Krueger. And just like with Michael Myers, I won't be mentioning any busts, body knockers, head knockers, or other miscellaneous releases in this video. I also won't be including any of NECA's replica gloves, in which case this would be the clear winner. Only action figures of the Springwood slasher in this video. I think that NECA have made more A Nightmare on Elm Street products than any other horror franchise. So with that said, grab a snack, relax, and whatever you do, don't fall asleep, as this might be quite an extensive video. And with that said, let the nightmare begin. So since I'm trying to rank all of these figures, of which there is a lot by the way, in order from worst to best, I guess we'll start with what I consider to be the worst or weakest NECA Freddy Krueger figure in my collection, and it's the Power Glove Freddy figure as seen in Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. And I just want to say, despite this guy coming in at bottom place, there really is no such thing as a bad Freddy Krueger figure release. From NECA, I mean. Seriously, Funko, what the f is this? I know that I've mentioned this Savage World line on the channel before, but they just seem to live rent-free in a dark corner of my mind. And I get the appeal of these guys in the sense of they're meant to be nostalgic figures based on the He-Man toys of the 1980s, but yeah, not a fan. But coming back to the Power Glove Freddy, this guy is from Series 4 of NECA's Nightmare figure line, and is based on Freddy's appearance in one of the most memorable scenes from Freddy's Dead, where Freddy uses a glove inspired by the infamous Nintendo Power Glove to control a video game version of himself and kill Spencer. As the poster of the film says, they saved the best for last. But most people would definitely disagree with that. But I actually really like Freddy's Dead. In fact, I prefer it to the Dream Child personally. But let me know in the comments below what you guys think is the worst entry into the Nightmare franchise. I'd really like to know your opinions. And the figure itself is perfectly fine. We have Freddy, his iconic fedora, and of course the Power Glove, which is the main aspect of this release. But due to there being no accessories, it's a rather bare bones release, which I guess is the reason he's coming in at the bottom. Also, the face sculpt is a bit of a strange one, and that's not to say I don't like it. If anything, I just find it really funny. Look at that dumbass expression on Freddy's face. In my head, I can see the screenshot from the film that NECA are trying to replicate, but I'm not so sure on the kawaii anime eyes that Freddy's got going on. He kind of looks like he's tripping out. So next up is Freddy as he appears in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And much like Freddy's Dead, this is another controversial entry into the Nightmare franchise. But again, I really like New Nightmare, and I always have. I think this was the first movie within a movie that I ever saw. And as a kid, it was really cool to see Robert Englund, Heather Langenkamp, and Wes Craven appear on screen as themselves. And I still really like the overall concept of this movie. This figure was the last release in the NECA 7-inch Nightmare on Elm Street line, and it actually came out many years after the Freddy's Dead Series 4 figures, but this was the only incarnation of Freddy that NECA missed out in that line. So it's really cool that they decided to produce this guy with the same clamshell packaging design so he fits in with the rest of the figures. Since this figure came out a good few years after the rest, he's the only Freddy that doesn't have the copy and paste statue-like pants and shoes, like the rest of the figures in that Nightmare line. His legs are also fully articulated too. As expected, Freddy comes with his signature fedora, and since this is Wes Craven's New Nightmare, he also comes dressed in that long black overcoat and is armed with the most unique glove in the franchise, the Bone Claw, which I think is a really cool design. The figure also comes with an interchangeable demon head, which is awesome, and although the figure is very well sculpted and the paint application is fantastic, Freddy does have a bit of a dodgy left eye that kind of throws off the head sculpt a little. I mean, one eye's looking at you and the other one's looking for you. But besides that, he's definitely a really cool release. And coming Coming in at 24th place, or something like that. I said there's quite a lot of Freddy figures to get through. We have the other figure that makes up the Series 4 of the Nightmare on Elm Street figure line, and it's another Freddy's Dead release. But this time it's Freddy Krueger as he appears in flashback scenes before he was hunted down and murdered by the vengeful parents of Springwood. And now that I'm recording this video, I do feel like I've put this guy a little low on the list because I honestly really love this figure. For starters, I'm so glad that NECA decided to produce a figure of Fred Krueger before he became a dream demon, as it's something that's not been done that many times in the past. Sideshow made a figure of Fred based on his appearance at the start of Freddy vs. Jason, and NECA themselves made a figure in 2004, which we'll get to shortly. And I think this figure is the last time it's actually ever been done, and the likeness to Robert Englund is absolutely spot on. They've really nailed it with the head sculpt. Besides that, the Springwood slasher comes with his razor glove and once again his fedora. Now we've got a couple of really left field releases from NECA that I'm confident in saying no one was expecting. And it's this retro cloth and this action figure release of Freddy Krueger as he appears in the 1990 LJN video game adaptation made for the Nintendo Entertainment System. This is such a niche idea from NECA, and I love it. The retro cloth figure is essentially a repaint of the Dream Warriors retro, and the head sculpt is magnificent. This is one of my favourite head sculpts used for any Freddy figure, but we'll talk more on that later on. This was initially exclusive to, I believe, Toys R Us in the United States, but got a wider release shortly after, which is how I got mine. As you can see, the head has been painted in a block salmon pink colour, and the same goes for the hand and the razor glove. As for the clothing, the pants are a stark red and the sweater is striped in 2 different shades of orange. The eyes are also completely blacked out, which is a little freaky. The fedora is actually the only thing here that has retained a normal colour. The clamshell box he comes in displays some striking artwork by Chris Longo that features a backdrop inspired by the video game art, and it complements the figure really well. When looking at the 7-inch action figure release, which was the first of the 2 to be produced, the first thing I've got to say is I absolutely love this box art design. It's more or less an exact replica of the original NES game box art, with added weathering around the edges and the added touch of the NECA seal of quality sticker in the corner, and that's an amazing little detail. Opening the window flap reveals Freddy in all his salmon pink and neon orange glory. This is once again a repaint of a Part 3 Dream Warriors Freddy, and he's donning the same colour scheme as the retro cloth. Above Freddy himself we have the HUD interface as seen in the NES game, and behind him is a pixel art house of a residence on Elm Street. On the inner flap we've got the game's end screen and message that appears after all of Freddy's remains have been collected and destroyed. This 7-inch scale figure is definitely my favourite of the 2, and that's mainly because of the overall packaging design that has gone into this. As strange as these figures are, and I know there's a lot of people out there who aren't really a fan of these guys, it's still a really cool concept that has since been done by other figure companies, and I think they're brilliant releases because I just love the reference and you can't take them all too seriously. On top of that, considering that this is what NECA had to work with in terms of reference material, I think they've done a pretty faithful job here and executed it very well. NECA also gave Jason Voorhees the same 8-bit treatment, but I'm sure I'll end up covering those figures in a future video. Next up we have a figure based on what is probably my least favourite entry into the Nightmare franchise, besides of course that 2010 remake which we will not speak of in this video again. A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child. And despite this film being one of the weakest in the franchise, I still really enjoy it, and it has some seriously standout scenes and dream sequences, a couple of which we'll talk about in this video. But taking a look at this version of Freddy from Series 3 of NECA's Nightmare line, the figure features an elongated arm and foot from the scene where Freddy returns, and he comes with a fedora, an alternate and much more menacing head sculpt, and this extremely well sculpted and detailed baby Freddy figure that is easily the coolest aspect of this release. Special effects artist David B. Miller was responsible for creating this little guy for the film, and he actually sells life-size replicas made from the screen used molds on eBay, so that might be a wishlist collectible for you Fred heads out there. David B. Miller also created Freddy's makeup look for the original film, and returned to design Robert's makeup for the Dream Child. And although I'm not a huge fan of how Freddy's makeup looks in this film, I've got to say that NECA have done a spectacular job on the sculpting and paintwork on this guy. And now we have a figure based on what many people consider to be the best entry in the franchise. A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, Dream Warriors. And this is the other Freddy figure that makes up series 3 in the NECA figure line. And first things first, this figure of Freddy comes with a fedora and, much like the 𝙆𝙬𝙎𝙬 figure we just looked at, a separate smaller figure, this time of the Freddy marionette puppet from Philip's Nightmare sequence. And this little guy looks fantastic, and I love how they put a small pool of blood under the feet to act as like a small display stand. But this just makes me think about the unreleased puppet replica, which is still a tragedy. Freddy also has an alternate head that actually has a hole in the back, which will allow you to shine a light through and recreate Freddy's death sequence from the film's finale. And that's a cool little detail right there. And speaking of cool details, Freddy also has the syringe fingers on his hand and glove from the infamous Let's Get High sequence from the movie. Overall, this figure is awesome. Now, sticking with the Nightmare figure line, up next is this figure released in series 2, based on Freddy's death scene in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, the Dream Master. And this is where the souls of all of Freddy's victims physically manifest themselves to escape from the flesh of Freddy's own body and literally tear him apart. These are some wild movies, man. You gotta love them. And this may be the most unique of the Freddy figures for obvious reasons, but also because I think that this is the only Freddy figure that doesn't include his signature fedora. But as you can see, Freddy's chest of souls is exposed, and there are various arms and hands protruding from his body and head, as well as this little bloke on his shoulder who's ready to tear off Freddy's jaw. This is a pretty gnarly release and is definitely a standout collectible in the figure line. So now we've got a couple of Comic-Con exclusive figures, and they both happen to be based on the comic book dream sequence from Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, which is definitely one of the most creative sequences in the entire franchise. And first up, we've got this 2012 San Diego Comic-Con exclusive black and white Freddy, and this release is just so cool. This guy is essentially a monochrome repaint of the previous Dream Child Freddy, featuring his menacing expression, but as you can see, he comes with some awesome accessories. First of all, we've got, and you guessed it, a fedora, but also this really cool skateboard that Freddy can stand on, and the most unique and standout accessory from this release, which is this paper cutout of Mark Gray that has a chunk torn out from where Freddy literally rips him to shreds. Overall, this figure comes with some fantastic content and is definitely a highlight and a gem from NECA's Nightmare figure line. And for the second Comic-Con exclusive, we have the second retro cloth figure making the list, and it's none other than Super Freddy, or Freddy Krueger as I like to call him. The dude's built like a brick shithouse. Again, based on the same comic book dream scene from Nightmare Part 5, Super Freddy was a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive from 2014, making this the first and last time this incarnation of the horror icon got a figure release. And I've got to say that NECA have just hit the ball right out the park with this one. The head sculpt and paint is, as to be expected, pretty fantastic, but the tailoring on this figure is just magnificent. Freddy is once again presented in monochrome colours and features a cape, a lightning bolt, and a super fedora. Actually, there's nothing special about this, it's just a fedora again. The packaging also features some stunning artwork illustrated by Christopher Ott and Jeffrey Trapp. And with those exclusives, we're now starting to get to the very best action figures of Freddy Krueger from NECA Toys. And this next one is one of the first Freddy figures I ever picked up for my horror collection. Freddy Krueger as he appears in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. And right off the bat, I've got to say that this is probably my favourite look of Freddy Krueger in the entire franchise. Makeup effects legend Kevin Yeager was the man in charge of designing Freddy's look for the film and subsequent sequels, and he just absolutely smashed it, as to be expected with Kevin Yeager. Freddy just looks so slimy and menacing in the sequel, and has a more witch-like appearance and sunken eye sockets. And NECA have translated all of that perfectly with this figure release. Just look at the detail on the head sculpt, with that truly evil grimace on his face. Freddy once again only comes with a fedora, but is also accompanied by an alternate head that features his exposed brain and a maniacal expression. Although this may not be amongst the top figures on the list today, it's definitely a personal favourite of mine. And now we've got a bit of a blast to the past with a figure from NECA's much beloved Cult Classics line. Specifically, this 2006 Hall of Fame figure of Freddy Krueger as he appears in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And I've said this a million times on the channel now, but I love the Cult Classic figure line, and this Freddy figure is a great example of why. As usual when it comes to NECA Cult Classics, the figures come in a clamshell box that displays the movie poster on the left. Freddy looks brilliant, to say this release is just shy of 20 years old now. And much like the more recent NECA figure, he comes with an alternate demon head and a fedora, although this particular fedora is a bit different from the others since it's more of a green colour, just like in the film. However, Freddy also comes with a movie script accessory and this whole display base piece, which was common for a lot of cult classics figures to have. A big reason why I'm such a fan of this line and why so many collectors look back so fondly on it. When comparing this to the most recent release, although NECA have come a long way in the years since the cult classics line, I've got to say that I personally prefer this figure, hence why it's higher on this list. There's just something so special about the cult classics releases, from the packaging design to the accessories, and of course the display bases, which really went the extra mile. His eyes are still a little bit fucked up though. And now we're going to take a look at a few more retro cloth releases, starting with the first retro cloth that I ever bought for my horror collection, and one which I believe may be one of the first, if not the first, retro cloth figure that NECA ever produced. And it's Freddy, as he appears in a 1984 classic that 40 years ago started it all. And this figure was released alongside Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th Part 3, which again will feature in a future video. And at that time, I'm not even sure if NECA were doing these characters as a one-off release in the retro style, or if they were planning to give us all of the retro incarnations that we have today. But I've got to say, even though this is one of the first figures from the line, and I remember some people being skeptical of the whole 1970s Mego retro cloth thing, this guy holds up incredibly well. First of all, the knitted sweater looks perfect and the tailoring there is just top notch. On top of that, the head sculpt is absolutely stellar, with a fantastic paint job to match. And much like how the figure is stylized, so is the lovely artwork by John Wardell, showing a very cartoonishly sinister Freddy in what I assume is Nancy's basement. And to follow up with the retro part 1, we've got the retro part 2 from Freddy's Revenge. And we just took a look at the part 2 Freddy from NECA's regular Nightmare figure line, and I talked about how much I love Kevin Yeager's makeup design for the film, and how well NECA translated that to an action figure. Well, the same applies for this guy right here, especially with those menacing head sculpts that, due to the scale, are even more detailed than the normal figure release. The alternate head in particular looks absolutely magnificent, and the extra slimy finish on the exposed brain just tops it all off. You can't help but appreciate the level of detail in both of these head sculpts, as they are truly spectacular and definitely speak for themselves. Freddy comes with his fedora, and not one but two right hands, one that has his iconic bladed glove, and an interchangeable hand featuring the blades protruding from the fingers, which is really cool. And the packaging features some stunning artwork by Nathan Thomas Milliner. Also, does anyone else think that this looks like Rudy Giuliani, or is it just me? Coming in next, we have the last figure that I own based on Wes Craven's New Nightmare, and it's this retro release, which is definitely the best of the three. This is also the most recent retro Freddy figure to date, and I think it shows because this guy is immaculate. The overall quality of this guy is just insane. For starters, the head sculpt is extremely well detailed and painted, and the same can be said for the alternate demon head sculpt as well. The bone claw also looks incredible and sculpted with a lot of fine detail. One thing I will say, however, and despite how good this figure looks, there is still something about that old cult classics release that just captures the likeness of Robert Englund ridiculously well over the others. Maybe it's just me, but anyway, the standout aspect of this figure has got to be the tailoring. The leather pants and jumper are just so well tailored to the figure and fit the guy so perfectly. And as you can see, he also comes with a removable black trench coat that is lined with Freddy's infamous red and green stripe pattern. Oh, and did I mention there's a fedora too? And to top it all off, this packaging features beautiful artwork by the very talented Devin Whitehead. We've now got 3 retro cloth Freddy figures that are all very fun incarnations of the character, and were all previously done by Mezco Toys in their Cinema of Fear figure line, and that was many years ago. And we're going to start things off with Dr. Freddy as he appears in The Dream Master, and this scene has one of my favourite Freddy one-liners.
Krueger! Well, it ain't Dr. Seuss.
As you can see, Freddy is decked out in full surgical gown, complete with a scrub cap, and he also comes with a bloodied surgical bone saw. But what's really cool about this figure is that it's sort of a 2-in-1, as Freddy also has his trusty red and green sweater at hand that can be swapped out with the medical gown, as well as a pair of sunglasses to recreate one of the most ridiculous yet badass shots from the franchise. The head sculpt on this figure is also perfect. Just look at that shit-eating grin. What an asshole. Nathan Thomas Milner's artwork is also extremely impressive as always. And next up we've got Chef Freddy from the Dream Child. And it's that absolutely unhinged dream sequence where Freddy force feeds Greta to death in what is one of the most memorable kills of the entire franchise. And to say that Dream Child is my least favourite entry of the franchise, I've complimented and rated very highly not one but two of its dream sequences. This movie really does have some standout scenes, and NECA have pulled out all the stops on this release. I mean, just look at this guy. First thing I've got to say is that the tailoring and details on the chef outfit is incredible. From the ruffles on the shirt to the cummerbund, is that how you say it? Cummerbund? It sounds a bit weird, but okay. And the green and red bow tie. It just looks so good. Freddy also comes with a chef hat and a large platter loaded with food and a creepy doll. The accessories look brilliant, as does the packaging artwork by Nathan Thomas Milner. The effort and love that went into this release is clear to see, and this scene also features one of my other all-time favourite Freddy Krueger one-liners. Bon appetit, bitch! So the penultimate retro cloth Freddy figure is one of my personal favourites, and it's Tuxedo Freddy as he appears in Nightmare Part 3 Dream Warriors. I absolutely love this figure release because for me this is such a standout and memorable moment from the franchise, and also much like the previous two figures we just looked at, this also is the scene that has one of my favourite Freddy one-liners. In fact, it might be my favourite of the bunch. I said, where's the fucking bourbon? And also one of my favourite nightmare moments in general. And now for the figure. Freddy is truly looking like the man of your dreams, decked out in his fancy tuxedo suit and swanky red and green bow tie. The tailoring is once again top notch, and in terms of accessories, Freddy comes with Kristen's handmade model of 1428 Elm Street, which is the house once occupied by the Thompson family, and is an iconic piece of imagery of the series as a whole. This model is faithfully recreated here by NECA and features a great amount of detail. The only thing the Mezco version has over this is that their figure came with Freddy's bones, which I think is a pretty cool idea, and also the head of Kristen's mum. And I really wish this guy came with that accessory. There's the perfect space for it right there too. Once again, this figure is accompanied by awesome packaging artwork done by Nathan Thomas Milner. And that means we're left with the final, and in my opinion, the best Freddy Krueger figure from NECA's retro cloth line. But we're far from the best NECA Freddy Krueger figure in general. And then there's all the ones that I don't actually own in my collection that I'm going to talk about. Shit, the amount of editing I've got to do on this video is going to be horrendous. You guys better like this one. Anyway, this retro figure is actually one that I recommend to you guys who have not yet bought any Freddy Krueger collectibles to pick up first. And it's the retro cloth Freddy Krueger as he appears in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 Dream Warriors. Now, the reason why I think this is such an essential figure is mainly because this is, in my opinion, the most iconic incarnation of this beloved horror icon. I've already praised Kevin Yeager's work on Nightmare Part 2, but like I said in my previous video on the channel, the unboxing of the life-size Freddy Krueger statue that if you've not seen, you need to check out, Part 3 is where Kevin Yeager truly nailed it, and his makeup design for Dream Warriors just helped elevate Freddy Krueger to that iconic status. And for most people, when they think of Freddy Krueger, this is still how they see the character in their head. Also, this is just a really awesome figure release from one of my favourite figure lines. The Springwood Slasher is depicted with a very fitting mischievous look on his face on what is an excellent head sculpt, and he comes with his fedora and his large chest of souls piece that goes under his tailored sweater and clips onto the body. Throw some incredible artwork by the great Jason Edmiston into the mix, and what have you got? A truly unreal figure release from NECA Toys. And coming in now in 6th place, we've got the Nightmare on Elm Street Series 2 Freddy figure from, again, Dream Warriors. And I've put this guy very high on the list for a number of reasons, but mainly because he is, in my opinion, the best figure so far from NECA's original Nightmare figure line, just beating out the Freddy's Revenge figure. This figure is once again based on what I'd argue is the quintessential look of Freddy Krueger, from what most consider to be the best entry of the franchise. Kevin Yeager's incredible makeup design is once again represented marvelously here, and the head sculpts on this figure are so accurate, detailed, detailed and overall perfect that this sculpt is still used by NECA for Freddy Krueger figures today, specifically the Ultimate Part 3 figure, which we're going to get to shortly. Much like the retro cloth figure we just looked at, this Freddy comes with his fedora and is sporting his grotesque chest of souls, but unlike the retro cloth figure, this isn't an interchangeable piece. However, also included is an alternate and more maniacal head sculpt and Kristen's model of 1428 Elm Street, which is sculpted and painted with great detail, another mold that I believe is still used by NECA today. Now, before I unveil what I believe to be the top 5 Freddy Krueger figures that NECA have ever produced, we're going to take a quick look at some honourable mentions of Nightmare on Elm Street figures that were made by NECA that I do not currently own in my own horror collection. And we'll start things off with these Toony Terror releases. As I've said on the channel before, the Toony Terror line isn't really my cup of tea, although I do like them and I really do appreciate the Hanna-Barbera cartoon style that NECA have gone with. There are currently 2 Toony Terror Freddys, one being his usual appearance, just a bit more Scooby-Dooified, and another depicting Freddy as he appears in the NES video game adaptation. And next we have the Accessory Set and Boiler Room Furnace diorama. I wasn't sure at first whether I'd go over these and include them in the video as they're not technically figure releases, but fuck it. First up, we've got the accessory set, which includes 2 Elm Street signs, one of which is a bit more bent out of shape and nightmarish, the TV set from another of Freddy's most infamous kills, and this thing looks fantastic with Freddy's head and arms that are comprised of electrical components coming out from the TV set. And finally, there's the Freddy worm creature bursting out of the wooden display base, and this guy is quite a large display piece and looks exactly like the one that we see on the screen. And then we've got the Freddy Furnace diorama, and this is the perfect accessory to go with any of the NECA Freddy action figures to create an awesome looking diorama display. The paint application on the display piece looks insane, and a lot of attention to detail has been put into all of the weathering on the furnace, making it look all corroded and dingy. This is something that will definitely elevate a Freddy figure display in any collection. And now we've got 2 old school quarter scale motion activated Freddy Krueger figures that speak lines from the movies. Starting with the 2004 Freddy Krueger, which is clearly based on his appearance in Freddy vs. Jason, which came out in the previous year. However, the box just says A Nightmare on Elm Street Freddy Krueger. The same way I've got a lot of love and nostalgia for the Cult Classics line, I also feel the same way about these old 18-inch quarter scale figures, and I wish that I owned some of these in my own collection. Freddy features a removable fedora and an alternate, more demonic head that makes an appearance in the final showdown between the Springwood Slasher and that mummy's boy that wears the hockey mask. The other quarter scale release is this new Nightmare Freddy from 2005, and this guy looks genuinely awesome. I've never seen one of these guys in person, but from online photos, he looks to have a surprisingly impressive paint application, especially for the time. And once again, this old sculpt captures the likeness of Robert Englund down to a T. The packaging for this release is also really well designed, and much like the other new Nightmare figures, Freddy comes with a green fedora and an ultimate demonic head sculpt. This seems like a good time to mention that there's also another new Nightmare Freddy figure released for the Cult Classics line in their series 2. But the only difference between this and the Hall of Fame figure that I own is the fact that instead of a demon head, Freddy has an alternate head sculpt with a different expression. So I'm pretty happy that I ended up getting the Hall of Fame one. And in recent years, we've seen NECA return to producing quarter scale figures of the Man of Our Dreams, but this time with brand new, updated, and much more detailed head sculpts. This includes Freddy as he appears in Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, and in Part 3, Dream Warriors. Both of these guys are essentially scaled up variants from their Ultimate figure counterparts, but the bigger scale allows for some more detailed paint applications. Part 2 Freddy comes with an interchangeable exposed brain head, an alternate hand with razors coming out of the fingertips, and a fedora. The Part 3 release includes the interchangeable crucifix head sculpt, an alternate chest plate to display Freddy with the chest of souls, and once again, a fedora. Both figures come in large window box display packages that feature a design of the front door of 1428 Elm Street. I'll be honest, out of all the figures on this honourable mentions list, these 2 guys may be at the top of the wish list for me. And another one at the top of the wish list is something that I actually mentioned early on in this video, and it's this figure that NECA produced back in 2004 based on Freddy's appearance before he was hunted down and killed by the parents of Elm Street. This figure of Fred Krueger was actually released as a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive, but despite being a limited edition figure, I can't find exactly how many of these guys were produced. The Springwood Slasher figure comes comes with a primary head sculpt that carries a very good likeness to Robert Englund. I don't think it's quite as good as the more recent Freddy's Dead figure, but definitely has its own charm and is a fantastic head sculpt for 2004. Freddy also comes with an interchangeable head to turn him into the horror icon we all know and love. This figure also includes a very eerie little doll accessory. I'd love to see NECA have another go at the unburned Freddy Krueger look for an action figure, as the last time they did it was over a decade ago now. And on top of that, I really hope they come back to continuing the Nightmare on Elm Street figure line and release more Freddy Krueger stuff in general. And earlier I said that I wouldn't mention the 2010 remake again, but unfortunately, back when the movie came out, NECA released 2 Freddy Krueger figures based on the movie. And I honestly don't have much to say about these 2 figures, but they both display very good head sculpts that share a great likeness to actor 𝙎𝙬𝙎𝙬𝙎. This is one of those movies that I saw upon its release and hated, but that was nearly 15 years ago now, so maybe I should go back and give it another go. I'm just scared it's going to be as dog shit as I remember it being. Let me know in the comments your guys' opinions on that remake. And the final honourable mention in today's video is a NECA Freddy Krueger collectible that I'm willing to bet not a lot of you guys out there even know about. And it's this huge 2-foot long Freddy vs Jason diorama statue that was released in a very limited quantity of just 650, which by the way may actually make this the rarest NECA horror release of all time. The resin statue is roughly in 1:6 scale and is essentially an upscaled version of the 2004 Freddy vs Jason figure box set. Speaking of which, I have right here. That's right, we've now reached the top 5 Nightmare on Elm Street action figures made by NECA Toys. And we've nearly covered every single Freddy Krueger action figure released in the company's history. This has been a mammoth of a video to make, and I really hope you guys have enjoyed it. So please like the video and slash the subscribe button, thank you. This Freddy vs Jason box set is one that was on my wish list for a very, very long time. So I was overjoyed to finally add this to the collection. I think this is a collectible that really speaks for itself. I mean, look how epic this thing looks. NECA have done a great job of recreating the showdown between Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees as a deluxe action figure box set. The set includes, of course, 2 figures of Freddy and Jason as they appear in the 2003 movie, an alternate demonic head for Freddy, a machete for Jason, as well as an alternate hand holding Freddy's decapitated head that Jason can hold in victory. The set includes 2 connecting diorama display stands that are covered in flames and a really neat little display plaque to finish off the entire look. The box set packaging is also phenomenal and is very similar to other NECA box sets around that time, including the very rare Friday the 13th box set that is still on my wish list and the legendary Night He Came Home figure pack. Overall, this set just kicks ass. Up next, we've got the first Ultimate figure to make an appearance in today's video, and it's the Ultimate figure of Freddy as he appears in Freddy's Revenge. And out of all the previous Freddy's Revenge figures we've looked at, I'd say that this is definitely the best of the bunch. Firstly, we get the inclusion of these 2 freaky baby-faced demon dog things that appear for a brief scene in the climax of the film and are never seen again. Seriously, what was the deal with these things? Anyway, they're both included in this Ultimate figure and make for really cool display pieces next to Freddy. In addition to the interchangeable exposed brain head, we also get a brand new alternate head sculpt for Freddy with a seriously pissed off expression, which looks to be inspired by the pool party scene from the film. And this is without a doubt the best head sculpt we've seen for this incarnation of Freddy, and is a perfect representation of Kevin Yeager's awesome makeup design. Freddy comes with a large flame that can attach to his back, which again allows you to recreate the scene from the pool party, which is also one of Freddy's most iconic moments.
You are all my children now.
The only thing that pisses me off about this figure is the fact that my fedora is loose from its place in the packaging and it just rattles around. It bugs the shit out of me. So now we've come to the top 3, and taking the 3rd spot, we have the Ultimate Freddy Krueger as seen in Part 3 Dream Warriors. And this figure is truly ultimate in every sense of the word. This takes all the best aspects and accessories from the previous Dream Warriors figures and throws them all together in one epic figure release. Included with Freddy, we have the interchangeable crucifix head sculpt, the alternate chest plate to display him with the chest of souls, the miniature marionette Freddy puppet, Kristen's Elm Street house model, and 2 separate hands with the needle fingers from Taran's nightmare sequence. Oh, and a fedora. Once again, the part 3 head sculpts and paint application on this horror icon is utter perfection. And much like the Dream Warriors retro cloth figure we looked at earlier, this is also the quintessential Freddy Krueger NECA figure. If you don't yet own any Freddy Krueger figures and you don't know where to start, look no further than this guy right here. So taking the number 2 spot, we have a Freddy figure that I've always considered to be NECA's very best, and it's the Nightmare on Elm Street Series 1 Freddy Krueger figure as he appears in the 1984 classic. And I actually own 2 of these guys because they are displayed slightly different in their packaging. Yep, that's enough to justify owning 2 of the exact same figure. It's a nerd thing. These figures were the first in NECA's Nightmare figure line that started back in 2011. And to say that these guys are over 13 years old, they've aged like fine wine. The head sculpt and paint application, not only on the head but the sweater and accessories too, is absolutely magnificent. And in my opinion, this is still one of the greatest Freddy Krueger action figures of all time. But the main aspect of this figure that makes it so unique is the fact that Freddy's extra long arms that are seen in Tina's nightmare sequence are included. And this still remains to this day the only time that this has been included with a Freddy Krueger action figure. Not even the part 1 Ultimate has the long arms. Additionally, the figure also comes with a fedora and an alternate skeleton face head, which looks awesome. There is something about this figure release that is just extremely special, and it's hard to put into words exactly why, but this is an extremely hard to find figure now and fetches some insane prices online, so I feel really fortunate that I picked these guys up when I did. Subjectively, these guys should take the number 1 spot for me, but there is an aspect of the next and last figure that I own that really just puts it on that winning podium. So we've finally made it to the final NECA Freddy Krueger action figure of today's video. We've now covered the entire history of NECA's Nightmare on Elm Street figures and talked about every single Freddy Krueger figure the company has ever released. And now we're left with the one that I consider to be the best one I own in my horror collection. And it's the Nightmare on Elm Street 30th Anniversary Ultimate Freddy. This figure was released back in 2014, and I believe this may be the first figure that NECA ever produced for the Ultimate line. But I've said that the Dream Warriors Ultimate is the quintessential Freddy figure, and I've also said that subjectively the NECA Part 1 figure from the original Nightmare figure line is my favourite. So why am I giving this figure the number 1 spot? Well, it probably has something to do with the fact that this figure in particular is signed by the man himself, Robert Englund. And yes, before anyone says it in the comments, I know that he's signed a part 1 figure with a quote from part 3 Dream Warriors. But look, I got this signed at the very first convention that I ever attended. That was back in 2014 and I was younger then, and also much dumber. Not to say I'm not dumb now. But I definitely didn't have the same collector mindset and wasn't as picky about things like that. But besides the fact that this figure is signed by Robert himself, for me personally, it has a sentimental memory attached to it of going to my first ever Comic-Con and meeting Robert Englund for the first time. This is also the first NECA Ultimate figure I ever picked up because again, I think it was the first the company ever put out there. And unlike the figures before it, this figure featured the now commonplace articulated legs too. Much like the Freddy figure we just looked at, this guy comes with his fedora and the skeleton face head sculpt, but there are some aspects of this figure that make it stand out from the Series 1 release, including the addition of a new menacing alternate head, an alternate hand with the green blood spitting out, a really creepy face mask of Tina that appears very briefly in the original film, and the coolest accessory in my opinion, Nancy's telephone that has Freddy's mouth attached to the bottom. And back in 2014, I and many other horror collectors assumed that NECA were going to release a Nancy figure, but unfortunately that still has not happened. And a double pack would have been perfect for the film's 40th anniversary this year. And the only thing about this figure that I wish they would have included is those long arms from the Series 1 release, as that would have made this a truly ultimate Part 1 Freddy. But other than that, this is a really awesome figure, and it set the standard for all NECA figures that followed it. So that brings us to the end of today's video, guys. And oh my god, I'm terrified just thinking about all the editing that I've got to do now. It's truly going to be my worst nightmare. But it's worth it if you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below which figures I talked about today are your personal favourites, and which Freddy Krueger figures from NECA would you like to own in your own horror collections. Also, if you're ready for more Freddy, check out my last upload where I unboxed my life-size Freddy Krueger statue from Suckface Studios. I promise you, you won't want to miss out on that video. Don't forget to like this video, slash that subscribe button. Happy 40th anniversary to A Nightmare on Elm Street and one of horror's most beloved icons, Freddy Krueger. And until next time, guys, take care.